just now. So we're going to have a little bit of a look here about, I'm going to do a little bit of moaning first, which is something I specialize in. And then we're going to have a little bit of look at like the state of actually what is actually happening. And then maybe a little bit of learning sneaking in about like what AI can help enable like a modern contemporary customer strategy essentially. So 71% of consumers expect personalization. This is a stat from the folks down at McKinsey in 2021. And I was probably one of the people who was part of the hyperbole at the time of like, oh my God, have you heard this? Like 71% of people expect it. You've got to be doing this. But now I actually feel like I want to put it in the bin, that stat. I don't even fit, I think we might be ready for a bit of a like, it's too much noise. Oh, what's this one? 76% of people find it frustrating when brands recommend things that aren't relevant to them. And I don't know about if you're anything like me, I've actually had to build a small cushioned room in my garden where I just go for a scream. Sometimes when someone's recommended me something that wasn't relevant to me. This is just nonsense, basically. I think in 2021, it felt like, oh my God, some urgency needs employed around this. But at this point now, I'm just like, okay, like we get it. But I actually think we might be ready for a little bit of a reset here because it's getting a little bit much. This whole personalization thing has got a bit carried away with itself. So what even is personalization is something that I think part of this reset, I think, like, why are we actually doing it? I think we've heard a little bit actually in some of the chat today about like, it has to be focused around maybe commerce, maybe, like not just doing it for the sake of it. And most of us in the room, I think, are part of organizations that are trying to create some commerce of some description, maybe grow, maybe even make some profit, that sort of thing. Now, as I see the world, there are 3 ways to grow the top line of an organization. You can get more customers, which sounds obvious, but there you go. New customer acquisition, good. Then you can get them to spend more often, which is purchase frequency. And then actually, when they do spend, could you get them to even spend a little bit more than they spent last time? Average order value. Whichever way you slice it, everything in terms of growing the top line of an organization can be badged under one of those 3 there, basically. And then to extend it a little bit further, and this applies to a B2B organization, a B2C organization. This is how you engage with your customers, basically, a framework for engagement. And essentially, we need to make each of these touch points work harder. And they all need to be aimed at, the box at the bottom. Maybe personalization is a way that you could do that on some of them. And actually, a simple example of that is like when someone reaches out to your contact center, maybe goes into a branch or a shop, what if you could, greet them, their name, and actually you go like, oh, how was that thing you bought like a month ago? You might like this one actually. Like really super practical, because actually these are all in the spirit of driving what is in the bottom box there. So optimizing these channels is something that we're now sort of getting a grip of here. Through the lens of like personalization. I don't know why that thing's so tiny up there. What does that say? Oh, it's the same as the last slide if you're following. Yeah. So to actually do personalization is quite hard, and that's okay to say that. And actually to do it really nicely, you probably want all this stuff in sync. And that is, I think everyone at Peak would say there's no one doing that today, like no one anywhere. But that should be a focus and a sort of North Star, if you want. I hate that phrase, but a North Star of where you're going to. Because actually what tends to happen is people take a sort of sporadic hit at stuff. Oh, we've got a nice point solution that does this thing in the basket. And actually we've got this thing that they're going to use on the tills in the stores. That's going to be nice. Excuse me. That's not very attractive, is it? And my little 1-year-old boy who was one a few weeks ago has started nursery. And there's a few parents in the room advised me, wait till he starts bringing colds home. And I'm just at the tail end, the really attractive end of the first cold that we've had to deal with. So essentially, what it does need to start with is some insight. and this is like, because a lot of people will say, but we don't even really know who our customer is today. Like, how can we build a personalization strategy? And it's a valid point. So this insight is important, but there is a contemporary definition of the word insight, which I think AI can play an enormous role in, basically, because AI essentially enables very, very fast insight. So you don't need to spend a year or two, with some expensive branding agencies and creative folks to really get to the nub of like where you can start to exercise some of this stuff. So, the state of the market. Let's get into this. So you might occasionally have heard people saying, "Oh, I tell you what, the MarTech world's a bit crowded." What the flipping hell is going on here with the MarTech world? This, incidentally, is reference from Chief MarTech blog, which is an amazing resource if you're into this sort of thing. For just, and this is something that they pull together on an annual basis. But there's just so much stuff. I think there is a box for AI on here, but most of that isn't even AI. This is absolutely crazy, like how to get your arms around this. I think they actually index like 11,000 like solutions on their website, which is just unfathomable. And I mean, incidentally, part of a good personalization strategy is actually knowing when to leave someone alone. And this gives me, an introvert, a bit of anxiety just looking at that. It just wants to make me stay in my house, to be honest. So moving further though into this, rule number 1, don't put too many words on a slide because they'll read that instead of listening to you. I've done it anyway. The point of this is marketing costs loads. And actually what we are seeing, or the great people down at Gartner having a look at, is utilization of this MarTech is actually decreasing over time. It's still expensive, but it's actually decreasing. So all this lot, people are essentially not getting a tune out of their marketing stack. So you think back to like, God, we're trying to wrestle with this personalization strategy. Like, no. You've got some fundamental challenges here. And actually, we could just maybe center it a little bit around a customer strategy. People say we've got to put the customer at the heart of it. It's just a cracking thing to say on stage, is that basically, because what actually does it mean about like how you, whatever the operating model of your organization is. And actually, accompanying stat from this is that apparently in the enterprise, the average sort of large-sized organization, there are 120 different components of a marketing stack, from like where the data is stored through to like, bothering a customer to do something. So that's just an immense amount of plates to spin, essentially. And then another number here from our own Peak's own proprietary sort of industry benchmark report, available at all good Peak websites, is, to paraphrase, basically marketing AI projects. So that last one wasn't even about AI, but marketing AI projects actually over-indexing their fail rate compared to other AI projects in an organization, which is quite alarming. There's sort of a narrative building here, you can tell. It's like there's so much noise. People are sort of like, I think we're doing some personalization. I'm not sure yet, and it's really tricky thing to navigate. And actually, we've got so far away from like why we're even doing this, maybe. So, actually, no. Before I get onto that, and there's some blindingly obvious reasons for it. Some that we would, you would assume. Some, actually, the world's got itself in a whole big squeeze, and budgets are actually now starting to decrease. So that's like a real, practical challenge. And then the need for perfect data is something that everyone in this room, that doesn't have to be a marketing project, is a thing that gets like, it's a bit of a misconception, I think, to be honest, especially in marketing, where it's more data rich typically. Skills is actually like the low key, like biggest one, because like just skills in general, whether that is like just amazing commercial people, because they're just hard to find sometimes, or like actually the technical skills to do this is really like delaying some progress for this. And then operationalizing the tech, I think we've heard it a number of times. So I think Mark from Speedy referenced it, like you have to be elegantly mapping this technology to your operating model. That's fundamental. And I'm not talking about AI there. That is just all of MarTech, and hopefully people would have some empathy for that in the room about like a whole variety of projects across an enterprise or a mid-sized organization. So that's the whinge and the moan sort of over. So we're going to move into now actually like, but it doesn't have to be this way, And actually we can get this sort of Maybe it's a reset. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but a bit, this new thinking around how we might approach this stuff. And we've got this like, it's not rocket science, this on the screen, but this sort of linear framework of like how you might be ready for tackling it. And actually, loads of people are in the box over on the left-hand side of the projector in the pre-exploration stage, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with any of these stages. But if you turn the telly on or turn the internet on, you think the whole world is using AI for stuff. Like I've been doing this for 6 years now, 3.5 years at Peak, 2.5 years at Footasylum, and mucking around with some digital stuff before then. And I can tell you that like you're probably not as far behind as you think. If you humbly think you might be, it's pointless even starting now because we must be so far behind. Like apart from some present company, and we've got Joe from Footasylum in a second who's going to be joining, in a couple of minutes he's going to be joining us, and a few other folks in the room. Like nearly no one in the grand scheme of the world, nearly no one is doing this stuff. So I think, but there's like it's made people like defensive to be like, oh yeah, we're not bothering with that. It's just like we've missed the boat, I think. But that's really where we are up to. So a reminder of this slide, I think, is hopefully a useful visual. You'll have seen this sort of thing before, probably, but a useful visual for just the flow of this. I think we are prescribing that it needs to have some insight at the start, but it can come as part of getting started. It doesn't have to be this like a reference, like, a year of, we're going to have just a quick look. We need to work out who our customer is, get some mood boards out, spend a lot of time out in the branches or the stores and stuff. And actually to move that into now what I would call a contemporary sort of customer strategy with AI and data like driving it, is this sort of thing where that insight purple bar at the top, these two bars at the top here sort of represent the insight as I'm framing it here. So these more like strategic brand personas, and then you might have 4, you might have 10, you might have 8, you might have a few, and we've all probably got, these would be terms for like tribes of consumers that engage with your organization. This could be you might be a manufacturer and you've got B2B relationships with people. They will be in tribes of like types of customers. Through to like, and this is a question I'm looking forward to asking Joe about, like some of the work that FA do, is because you can craft these personas that then a load of segmentation can hang off. But like codifying these personas with AI, and they can change, they can wriggle around, they can update, they evolve, people move from one to the other. AI is an enabler to keep tabs on it, and then, because that's insight to a lot of people. Like, can I just see what's going on, please? And then hopefully make some decisions. And then you can get into what they teach you at marketing school, about the sort of, in-market churn and these sort of like behavioral RFME style, segments that hang off it. But it'll have been through this lens of what your brand and your customer actually wants. And I'm saying, this is a plea for me. Please stop spending 6-figure amounts of numbers with like very nice, very cool, very snazzy, like branding agencies basically that produce these like brand Bibles that then just go and die on a coffee table somewhere basically without the sort of, because imagine you're a CRM person and you get this like, right, here's the new guidance from insert agency, consultancy here. And you go like, how on earth am I going to codify that into like sending some emails or sending some push notifications, or how am my sales team actually going to like translate that into like doing some stuff? There are obviously ways that you can make that lineage, but it's a bit flaky and it's not dynamic, and because tomorrow it's changed. And so this is where AI and this like reactive agile thing is totally vital to like a modern customer strategy. So moving it into, it would be remiss of me to not come on here and give you a little bit of peak action. So this is our audience's application, which is basically doing this for our customers essentially. So if you can think of, this is just like a snapshot of a screenshot basically from it. And you can see there, if you've got this segment map, and this is like the insight and the governance of your personas first and foremost. And then you can start to cut it with all those behavioral things that I was referencing. And I remember actually from the time at Footasylum, when I first saw one of these, it was like oxygen in the organization. We'd never seen our customers just so like simply laid out like that, able to go, oh, wow, okay, because Peak had helped us like create that insight around these personas. We had 6 as it happens, large tribes of customers. And then you can start to see, and it's got all the, the metrics that you need in there, but then it changes tomorrow, and then you can, oh, I want to see how people are moving around them, and this is all possible today. And then it leads into this, like, so, if you imagine you've got a strategic persona, and then you go, right, I want to see who's churn. The thing that is sometimes people are susceptible to going to is like, right, we'll get the database out. And again, this could be B2B or B2C. Right, let's get all our churned customers out. And you go, yeah, you've got loads of them. Like, it's okay. Like, that's just how it goes. But that's not still maybe like an overriding preference of like who they are. We go, well, they haven't bought for ages. Like, just send them a discount or do something. And it's a bit clunky, and you can quickly start to see how complex this would get. And I use the word governance carefully because I think this sort of like, like a digital governor of all of your segments where you can continue to add and augment and update and change and tinker with. But if we had 4 personas on the other thing there, and every day there's 4 different, so that's like 16 segments a day to do something with, and that's before you're getting into any of the detailed stuff. So it's a really interesting, hopefully, thought experiment of like the complexity of the personas and segmentation that can occur inside a business, but then it's totally unfathomable to do a human capability to try and like govern all of that over a period of time. So back to my favorite slide. Then, armed with that insight and an AI just like powering that on a day-to-day basis, it could be more often than day-to-day, but like I say, a daily cadence. Then we can start to optimize all of these channels in your organization, which is driving these commercial metrics all the time. And that, I would suggest, is a personalization strategy, basically. So, final slide, and then I'll welcome Mr. Joe onto stage. I'm recommending it's time for a little reset, potentially, with all of this, because this has just got so carried away with itself that it's making some people not even want to start, or certainly like really kick it down the road, basically. AI is the sort of powerful enabler for a modern customer strategy, but we have to bring it back to like practical commerce. It has to be about your customer strategy first, not like jumping the gun and trying to just like sprinkle it with some AI tooling. And then we can say you might be doing personalization right. Thanks for listening. So, time for something altogether more interesting than me. So, I had a pleasure of working with Joe at Footasylum. Joe is going to give a little bit of an intro to himself when he comes on here now. But we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that Footasylum have been on, taking some of the stuff that we've just talked about, and hopefully some extra interesting bits. So please join me in welcoming Joe Turner onto the stage. Hello.
It's a bit strange when we've worked together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit. It's quite fun, actually.
We pretend we don't know each other.
Well, so I haven't done as detailed, as diligent, or as nice an intro as Holly has been furnishing us for other folks today. So would you be so kind as to give us a quick intro of yourself, Joe, and a bit about maybe like how you've arrived at this role that you do today at FA?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it reasonably short and sweet because people don't really care about that stuff, do they? But I'm Joe Turner. I'm head of digital trade at Footasylum. I've been with the company for coming up to 9 years now. So my current role and responsibility is around the trading of the e-commerce website with a focus on the consumer, on the customer. I think in that 9 years, the company's obviously been on a journey. I've been on a journey with it. I've held various different roles within the business, but all of them focused around the customer and the consumer. As part of that business growth and that business change, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of business sort of transformation projects, digital transformation projects. One of those being our relationship and our partnership with Peak, which is why I'm here today.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. before we start, we'd really like to invite some questions from the audience on this. So I've got the magic iPad in front of me here. So please, if you think of anything along the way, please furnish it. We want to test Joe's on-the-spot ability to answer awkward questions from the audience. That'd be good fun. So actually, to pick up just a little bit from where I've left off there, like, is it actually time for a reset, or am I barking up a tree that doesn't even exist?
No,
you're possibly the wrong person to ask, because you're actually getting a tune out of all of this.
No, I mean, I think you're definitely onto something in terms of having to reset around personalisation. I think there's two sort of main areas that we do need to reset. One of them is our expectations, and the other is our definition. So I think Tom kind of alluded it to a little bit during his presentation, but I think we expect to be a lot further down the line than we are sometimes, and I think we expect other retailers to be doing a lot more than they are. And I think when you combine those two, you're probably not in a bad position if you sat in this room when it comes to personalisation. Secondly, from like a definition point of view, I think we need to reset how we talk about personalisation. I think we're trying to live up to these industry definitions of what it means to sort of deliver personalised content. And I think it's almost a time to just take a little bit of a step back and think, what does personalisation mean? I think the example that I always fall back to is Starbucks, primarily because I'm addicted to caffeine, but I think it's also because it has a very sort of simple, graceful but relatable example of personalisation, and that is the names on the cups. So they've been doing that for like the past 10 years. I think they have over 35,000 restaurant locations worldwide, millions and millions of cups of coffee every single day. They're this megalith of coffee generation, of caffeine fueling. And I think that by nature of it makes them quite impersonal. It doesn't make them very relatable, just the scale of their business. And it seems like something very, very simple, something sort of easily overlooked. But the reason why that name is on that cup, it's personalisation, it's that human element. It's what it really says is, yes, we make millions and millions of cups of coffee every single day, but this one is for you, and this one is going to be just how you like it. And I think for me, the definition of personalisation kind of lies in that very simple act of trying to be more human, of trying to be more relatable to your consumer.
Yeah.
And then it also kind of rolls into something else you were talking about in terms of the business reasons or the driving, motivating factors behind sort of personalisation. So the fact that you receive that consistent sort of personalised experience, they're not doing it for no reason. They're doing it because it drives frequency, it drives repeat purchases. You're going to go back because that experience is both personal but repeatable at the same time. So yeah. I think we can get hung up on these definitions, these quite technical. I think that's been a theme of today as well. Is almost stripping out some of the complexity of the language and the definitions of things, and kind of taking it back to its rawest form. And I think for me, that's what I think we need from a reset perspective.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, okay. So we've referenced the 71% stat on the first or second slide from McKinsey about people expect it. Footasylum's actually got quite a range of demographic, because there's obviously a lot of aspirational sort of teenage consumers, but then you've got parents who often are on the hook for paying for some of this stuff. What would you, through the lens of that 71% soundbite, what do you think that Footasylum customers actually want from personalisation? If we go, yeah, I think they want it, but what does it actually mean then to them?
Yeah, I think the 71% stat's an interesting one, because I think probably 70% of those consumers don't actually realise what they want from personalisation.
Yeah.
I think for us, our consumer expectation, it's driven by what they're doing away from Footasylum. It's driven by the media that they're interacting with, whether it's sort of TikTok or Netflix. I think that is the driving force behind their expectations. I think those algorithms within those platforms are serving them sort of tailored recommendations based on what they're engaging with. And I think that expectation has flown over into how they interact with us as a retailer. So I think they expect us to know what they like, know what trends they're interested in, and to sort of deliver them content that kind of shows them that. So it's about being personal but not creepy.
Yeah, well, that's a bit. It's like what? So does that mean they should? Is creepy like the exact product that they want, or is actually do you aggregate it up to like a category or just a theme or a mood or like what? Because there's types of like detail there, isn't there?
Yeah. Again, I kind of roll it back to that human element, that real life element. I think it goes down to how well you know them, like how well. And it sounds strange because you don't really know your customers. You don't. Well, from a digital perspective, you don't really know your customers in that you don't meet them face to face. You don't physically hand them like the products. You don't welcome them personally when they visit your website. But you do know about them in terms of the data. It tells you where they're at in that customer life cycle, how far down that journey they are. And I think the further they are down that journey, the more personal you can be without being creepy. I think it's like if you know somebody really well and you walk up and you give them a hug when you greet them, that's fine. If you do that to a complete stranger in the street, it's creepy.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. That's a nice analogy for it. I think that's spot on as well, isn't it? That like, I like that as a framework for like, how well do you actually know them?
Would you hug them and then tailor your personalization from there?
Yeah, and then scale it back drastically. Yeah. Okay. So we've also referenced, I hope you don't mind, just referencing a bit of what we were talking about there. I think there's so much crossover with how you guys are doing it. Talking about like the insight bit and then the strategy that comes with it. So as much as you're sort of comfortable with sharing, like, can you talk a little bit about like how you've been enabled to use like a strategic view, and then you get into this like the tactical stuff week in, week out, and maybe you could share a little bit of your experience about like how serious a component part of that is, and how that goes.
Yeah, so I think it's probably quite relatable as well. But I think when we first engaged with Peak, we'd pretty much say we didn't really know our consumer or know our customer. I think a lot of our knowledge of our customers based on kind of boots on the ground. So we'd have our buying and merchandising team attending sort of fashion shows, attending festivals, attending different sort of cultural events, and developing these tribes and these personas based on what they were seeing there and then in front of them. Obviously, this comes with a degree of kind of like personal bias. It's it's very, very sort of subjective. It's very down to that lens of that individual buyer or merchandiser. I think where we've kind of taken it from there is using the sort of the power of segmentation to give us a different view of our customer. So we have a very varied customer base. We've obviously got a lot of people who are going to Footasylum shopping for themselves, but we also have a lot of customers who are shopping for partners or for kids, etc. So I think the first step for us was to try and get a better view of exactly who our customer are. That was at a high level, sort of tribal segmentation.
This is the 4 or 6, 8 like macro segments for what everything hangs off. Then essentially,
yes. It was the first layer of segmentation for us. Really, was trying to understand who that person is buying for. So we looked at breaking it down into, right, okay, is it men buying for men, buying for themselves, or men buying for kids, or women shopping for themselves, women shopping for kids, etc., to give us that very sort of high level motivation behind what our consumer was doing and who they were shopping for. I think really interestingly, we looked at how those segments shifted over periods of time, like Black Friday, and it probably isn't a surprise to anybody that men are more selfish than women when it comes to gift giving. I think we found that over sort of Black Friday and Christmas period, there was a lot more movement in that sort of women shopping for women segment versus the men shopping for men. They just continue to shop for themselves.
You can prove it with data. That's sort of a good thing. Yeah.
I mean, we're probably both in that bracket, so guilty there. But it was starting to actually back up what we thought our consumer was with data. And then kind of since then, kind of continuing to delve a little bit deeper in terms of starting to look at sort of predictive segmentation. So not just sort of who they're shopping for, but what they're shopping for, whether it's sort of a division, whether it's an item category, whether it's a particular brand or particular product, to get that next layer of granularity, looking both backwards at sort of historical data and transactional data, but also pulling in sort of real-time, like behavioural data, really, in terms of what they're viewing, what they're interested in at the moment, to be able to start to deliver more personalised experiences.
Yeah, I've actually there's a question that was making me laugh, which is why I was smirking before. I wasn't smirking at you, which we'll come to at the end because that's quite fun. But there's a question that's come in, which I think is just an interesting, just as an aside, as we're moving through some stuff. Like, is personalization just for digital channels, or should we consider it in like bricks and mortar too? I wonder whether, because I'm aware of some like examples where this has fueled some like beautifully practical stuff that's happened in the stores. Maybe you could, I'll put you on the spot there. Can you think of an example where that's happened?
Yeah, it's definitely not exclusive to digital. I think there's been a shift over the past few years towards a more omni-channel approach from retailers anyway, so joining up that offline and an online journey. So part of that, and part of adding those additional sort of retail data points into your segmentation, that by nature opens up the opportunity to deliver personalization to your store customers, to your retail customers. It happens already in a lot of sort of luxury fashion businesses, particularly. I think early doors for Footasylum is quite a niche example of how we use some of that customer insight in our retail spaces as well. I think this is going back to maybe 2019, 2020. We were looking at sort of sales of sliders and socks, and we were able to identify through insights that there was this trend of customers buying them to be sort of wore together. So what we did off the back of that was we essentially merchandised them together in the retail space. We brought them forward, told them as a story across the stores and the web, and we saw, you know, a really strong performance off the back of that. But that was taking a consumer trend that we saw digitally, but just executing it across the full retail estate. Yeah,
I love that. And actually, that would drive adoption of like using data in teams that never thought they would be impacted by it, probably.
It always makes me laugh, the example, because it sounds so stupidly simple, but it was one of the first tangible examples of using data within the business that was almost like, it was so simple, so low risk. You're like, well, let's just act on it.
Yeah.
But it was one of that acting on it and the following results was almost like a little bit of a catalyst for adoption of like, actually, the insights we're getting from this are real and can be quantified.
It's really cool. So moving it on to data. So again, we reference like, is it a misconception? Like people like, oh, I'm not sure we're in the right spot yet to have AI have a look at our data. People almost apologetic for the state of their data before you get to have a look at it. How has this played out at FA? Like, was that a challenge, or what? You know, and where are you today with it?
Yeah, I think it was obviously a challenge at the beginning. I think we're going back, you know, a number of years. I think if you were to speak to us at that time, we would have said that we don't have the data. Well, we'd either turn around and be quite sceptical, say we don't have enough, or it's not of a higher standard to be actionable. But I think at the same time, we have a culture of sort of test and learn, of sort of fail fast and find out. And we ultimately saw the AI opportunity as something almost too big to ignore. I always say it's kind of like the example of, you know, you'd rather be the meteor than the dinosaurs. Like, you don't want to be kind of like left behind and be crushed by this big AI machine learning rock that's coming hurtling your way. So I think we really wanted to get on board with it kind of early doors. That sort of test and learn culture allowed us to kind of do that, but we thought our data wasn't in the right place. I think Peak quite quickly shown us that actually we do have enough data and it is of a good enough quality to start to release some value.
Yeah.
We've obviously been on a significant journey over the last few years, mainly kind of looking at how we how we view data within the business, sort of going all the way back to our buying and merchandising teams and the data that they enter into various systems at the point of kind of bringing that stock into the business, getting them to appreciate that has a downstream impact on sort of decisions that are being made elsewhere. So there's that big kind of like education piece, but there's also the side of it where, we just want to enrich the data that we hold within the business. So like introducing a new product information management system that allows us to collect additional data points, add touch points to all the product data we're getting, which ultimately it just allows us to kind of like enrich what that model's able to do.
Yeah. So actually there was some stuff to work with at the start, and then it starts to shape a data strategy or influence a data strategy basically to create new data points.
I think if you sat in this room, you've probably got enough data to start looking at it. I think obviously that data can always be improved.
Yeah.
But I think if you sat here, then you've got enough of an understanding of data to be acting on it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So something that I'm really always interested in a lot of I spend a lot of time with existing Peak customers. I spend a lot of time with people who maybe one day would like to become a Peak customer. Something that is really, really significant, and it's about like mapping it to the operating model of your organization. Like what actually happens with like the audiences application in Footasylum? So like Monday morning, CRM manager, how are you guiding like what do they actually do day to day with the stuff?
Yeah, so from a trading point of view, which is primarily where sort of I'm focused on, I'm kind of tasked with solving the problems that we encounter, the challenges we encounter on a day-to-day basis around, right, okay, this item's not selling, or we need to push this category. So it's a part of that process now. So I think we've had a really mild summer. Jackets and coats obviously kick in when winter comes around. You bring your stock in early ahead of that time. So I think a lot of businesses will be looking at, right, we've got a lot of jackets and coats stock in the business. We're waiting for the weather to drop. But actually what kind of like the audience's application allows us to do is see, well, there is still a segment of customers that's interested in buying that product now.
Right.
That motivation might be back to school. It might be, a cold weather holiday or something like that. But for whatever reason, they are showing the intent to sort of purchase that product category. So it allows us to take that challenge and find a relevant audience to kind of like serve that messaging too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So that's like that, and that's helping like tactical challenges that are popping up, right? And it's like, because it might be you got too much stock of something. It's like, okay, we need to find some. But then I can't help but be thinking, going back to just on that example with the jackets. Obviously, it's a very retail specific example. This. But you'll have certain tribes or personas that are, actually research a little bit earlier, and actually, they will buy jackets in August, actually, because that's just how they do it. So there's different, and this is really having a grip on all the nuance of your customer base, I guess.
Yeah, and it's also where the behavioural data comes in. So I think if you always kind of like look back purely on transactional data, it will tell you that people buy jackets and coats at a certain time of year, which you'd kind of expect that, but when they sort of with retail and fashion being so seasonally driven, I mean, we saw it early in the year with summer coming sort of early and warmer. If those seasons change or that weather moves, your timings are thrown off, and your transactional data doesn't always account for that. But by marrying that historical data with sort of behavioural data in terms of what people are viewing on the website, what emails they're opening and engaging with, etc., you can kind of find that sort of sweet spot of the consumers who are genuinely showing an interest.
Ready for it. And there'll be seasonal that's a seasonal example, but there's seasonal nuance in every single business anywhere. Absolutely. Probably, no matter what you do, there's peaks and troughs of what they do. Yeah, okay, really interesting. So you've been at this now with Peak for like 5.5 or 5 and even longer years. Something I was interested to ask, because there's a lot of talk about value, and value is how it all has to revolve around value. But you've sort of almost done the value bit like some actually quite outrageous like sound bites over the years of amazing ROAS performance on this from using sort of predictive segments, uplifts in this channel, even like channel mix as a thing that's been influenced by it. What do you actually define as like success these days? Because I think this is with AI projects, they come and give you a bang of like some stuff, and then you go, oh, is that it now? We're just bobbing along like this. But like, wait, that's not necessarily how it goes. But what can you talk about? What is actually success these days with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you're kind of suggesting, like the definition of success has changed quite a lot. I think when we first engaged with sort of AI and audiences, those success metrics were kind of like very specific. Were kind of very niche in terms of, right, we want to improve pound per send from an email point of view, or we want to improve open rate or click-through rate, or we want to see ROAS increase from a paid social perspective. As part of that rollout process, we went through various sort of phases of iteration and testing and A/B testing, and we were able to sort of prove with a pretty high level of confidence that by integrating sort of the audience's data, by integrating the predictive segmentation into those day-to-day processes, we were able to see those metrics lift. We were able to see all those sort of key KPIs improve. I think since that point, and as our kind of use of those audiences has matured, as it's become just part of our day-to-day workflow, particularly from like a CRM point of view, it's kind of changed. I think the business now is looking at, how does it influence overall profitability?
Right.
How does it solve like the bigger business challenges in terms of making sure that we're maximizing like the profit from every single product, essentially. Yeah. So we've gone from quite kind of niche KPIs, which they're almost kind of proof of concept measures, to trying to understand the like longer term impact and longer term value that we get out of executing this strategy.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of how Mark from Speedy was talking as well. I think about that initial hit, and that's a big inventory project as opposed to a customer one. At least how it started, and you end up becoming about the bottom line is really ultimately more strategic after you've proven out that we trust this thing now, and now we can get after that.
Yeah, I think for a lot of businesses it will start with that kind of short term measure, because it's about gaining confidence. It's about gaining belief. It's about kind of like trusting the process.
And it does cost money to do this stuff. Like, we're not running a charity, unfortunately. So it is like, it's cost money. So it has to be like at least wiping its face and then on a path somewhere, right, in the very early weeks and months.
Yeah, well, I always kind of like draw the analogy of, it's kind of like when you first integrate with these solutions, it's kind of like making first contact with an alien race. You kind of like trying to figure out whether it's there to sort of help or harm you. And it's kind of usually met with a little bit of a standoffish, a little bit of pushback from sort of certain areas of the business. Not everybody's, not everybody in every business is a visionary. Not everybody in every business is, responsive to change or it looks forward to change. So I think during the early stages, having those very sort of specific measures to be able to say, this is moving the needle.
Yeah,
they're necessary to kind of like build trust, to allow you to then kind of like focus on, right, okay, how is this actually going to revolutionize the business?
Yeah, okay. Famously, Rochdale twinned with Mars as well. I'm from Oldham, so I'm allowed to say that, just over the hill. Okay, all right, because I think that's very interesting. I think that almost like you have to keep the novelty alive, and actually if the metrics and the success criteria evolves, and that's very cool to hear that. Yeah. Okay, there's quite a few audience questions, so I'm going to do one, maybe two more of ours, and then we'll move into a couple of those then. We've around 10, 12 minutes left, something like that. So something that is a big transformationalists challenge with this and other stuff, probably just generally in technical advances, is what even is it? What's it doing? I was wondering whether you might be able to give us your version of when someone at Footasylum says, I don't know much about that. Like what? I don't know what we're doing with that AI. Like what actually? I thought we were doing. So is that not what we were doing before? Like what? How do you then go? No, 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 no. Like what's the? And salespeople from Peak in the room need to just write this down. Like what is the thing that you actually like say to people?
So I guess during kind of like the early days, it was just kind of explaining different. It sounds ridiculous, but explaining the difference between kind of like AI and BI. I think when we first engaged with Peak, we didn't even have a BI team. So just because something's sort of data driven doesn't mean it's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah.
I think how I like to talk about AI, it's almost like this invisible colleague. So I think it was mentioned by one of the sort of speakers before around how, it's good to disagree with each other. So I just kind of like see AI as just another person sat at that table, kind of offering opinion that may be different to yours.
Yeah.
And just like you would with a colleague who offers a different opinion, it's worth listening to sometimes. It's kind of like worth hearing out the kind of like the logic or the reason behind it. So I think as soon as you start to realise that it's not here to kind of completely replace you, it's not here to prove you wrong, it's not trying to prove you wrong, it's just offering an unbiased opinion on something.
Yeah.
And to kind of like, to Speedy's point as well around, sometimes that initial recommendation isn't going to be right. It doesn't invalidate your experience. It doesn't invalidate your expertise around, knowing what's being driven by seasonality. Obviously, the models and stuff can learn with that, but it doesn't make your experience any less valuable. It's just a different opinion at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I don't think that's. Yeah. I think that is a different perspective on it. Actually, it's really interesting. Last one from me, and then we'll move into a couple of audience ones. So, as much as you are comfortable with sharing on this, like not everyone loves to talk about like the future, what's next. But I'm sort of curious to ask, and people might be interested to hear, like, 5-6 years into a relationship of like really like doing nicely with this stuff, like what is actually like the sort of maybe big, maybe practical, useful, like forward, like next sort of what are the next moves that you in your mind as you move forward with this?
I think it's about kind of like, well, for us personally, it's about building on what we've done so far. So, we've done a lot of work around sort of audiences and sort of customer segmentation, but I think the future is sort of closing the loop with the rest of the kind of business processes. And I think that's where the real sort of compounding value of AI lies, really. It's kind of having that thread got to sort of run through all those different sort of business areas, from stock and pricing to sort of markdown to inventory optimization.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like closing that loop. I think an interesting perspective is actually it kind of starts with the customer piece. It starts with the audience piece because they influence the pricing. They influence stuff like product elasticity from a pricing perspective. They influence demand. So for us, I think we've made a really sort of solid start. We've made some really good progress, and we've seen some really good results in terms of what we've done so far. But I think if we want to kind of take that to the next level and kind of like truly sort of transform the business with AI, it's about kind of closing that loop with other business functions.
Yeah, okay. Because I think at this point you're leveraging data points from around the business, but actually starting to influence process and connections around like what is ultimately an e-com, omni-channel function. That's what you're talking about, right? So actually more practical like linkage.
Yeah, and sort of the addition of like just the continuation of that enrichment process. So looking at what additional data points we can bring in, whether it's sort of customer service data to kind of like enrich those audience profiles, so we can start to understand not just what they're interested in, but the sentiment, or how our last interaction went with them, bringing in sort of fulfillment. Was their order delivered on time? Did they meet their expectations, etc.? And then obviously bringing in that wider sort of omni-channel data set so that we've got that joined up view of them, wherever they are as a consumer.
Yeah, okay, nice. 'Cause that's quite advanced, I think, really. And there's a lot of change that comes with that, but like ultimately, I suppose you've got a strong foundation with the customer stuff now. Yeah, cool, thank you. Okay, so we're going to spin it into a couple of, I think we've time for a good couple. So actually one here is, and it's because you just mentioned markdown. Personalised pricing can be contentious as you don't give an equitable offer to all consumers. I don't think this is predicated on FA today. I don't think you do this. But do you, read the question first. Do you engage with this at FA? And if so, how do you navigate it? I think you've shared this is maybe a future moment, but like this is like you're getting into like Nectar and club card style like sophistication here, but how do you approach that?
I think there's a couple of different ways that you can approach it. One of them is obviously driven from a loyalty perspective, like your club cards, like your Nectars, etc.
Yeah.
But then it's also kind of taking it up a level, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like a one-to-one sort of markdown offer. It could be just like a group of customers who are more likely to respond to that promotion. So I think it's about ultimately it comes down to identifying the most profitable way of kind of selling that product. If you can understand from a pricing point of view when that product is likely to be needed to be marked down, and you can understand the entry level markdown of that product is, let's say it's going to be 30%. If you can actually say, well, actually, through audience insights, I think I've got a segment here of 100,000 customers who would respond well to a 10% off promotion.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what you're doing is just maximising the profit out of that product.
So you're ultimately actually, because this is where it crosses over into like a B2B or a B2B2C like operating model, is like that's almost like a price list per persona, actually, isn't it? So that and then you have to orchestrate that, which obviously you need some tooling to do that, I suppose. But that's sort of what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And actually aggregating up to so it isn't actually about one-to-one pricing at that point, is it really? It feels like one-to-one pricing maybe when you receive it, but another 99,909 have received the same offer potentially.
I'd use the expression more personalised, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, more than none, personally. Yeah. Which is about the level we need to try and get to, clearly, yeah. Okay, a fun one. Well, it's not fun, it's very, very serious, actually. When is it appropriate to hug customers?
I think I'd hug every customer who buys something, to be honest. I think if they're spending more money with us and they're shopping more frequently, then they deserve a hug.
Sage advice, that. Okay, very good. Is Footasylum using any generative AI in the business, and how's it going? Or have you talked about it? Like where are you up to with that?
So I think we're still looking at kind of like where it sits within a lot of our sort of process flows. I think there's some, from our point of view, I think some very obvious applications around things like product listing and stuff like that, where it can serve a purpose. We've been testing the outputs of those sort of product listing prompts and stuff. I think what we feel is that there's still that need for that human kind of filter on those outputs. I think an example would be testing the output around a pair of women's parachute pants, like parachute cargo pants, or big baggy cargo pants. I think the AI was recommending that they're suitable for climbing mountains, and you kind of like they've read cargo pant and sort of translated that to be sort of utility and go and climb a mountain with that. Whereas I think I think the bit that's kind of missing a little bit is that context of how our consumer is interacting with those products, because I think particularly from a fashion point of view, there's lots of trends around really sort of functional, practical garments being worn purely for fashion purposes, and I think the generative AI is still there's still challenges around it, understanding that that kind of misuse of the product, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of like semantics and things in product descriptions that can make that tricky, I guess.
Yeah, so I think we're just trying to, fine tune what that might look like for us as a business.
Do you actually want to use it or not? Like, is it just so you can say you have, or is it actually like, no, we actually think there's some money there we can get after that with that?
It comes down to like the business impact, really. I think ultimately I'm up for engaging with any solution that makes my life easier.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of either got to be able to be tied back to some sort of increase from a KPI point of view, even if it's just giving our product listers more time back in the day. So sort of measuring that time to get the product to the completion in terms of product listing, if that gives them a little bit more time to then focus on actually the product data points that we're adding around them, then
that's fair.
There's value in that. So it's not necessarily like you do it and you get a monetary reward for it. That if that reward is in time, then it's how we can use that time better.
Okay, very good. Okay, I've been really trying to make this not like every other personalization chat where you go like, what would some advice be? We're not going to do any of those questions. So I think we will draw it to a close there. If that's all right with everyone. Then we're going to have a little break now, I think. I think we will call you back when we're ready for the final sessions of the day, but hopefully that's been somewhat insightful and useful. Thanks very much, Joe. It's been really fun
My pleasure.
chatting to you. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you.